Annie Leibovitz is a photographer whose portraits have helped define the look of American popular culture over the last 20 years. In the 70s, she worked for Rolling Stone, helping to establish it as the style Bible of the decade. Then, in the early 80s, demonstrating a keen intuition of trends, she moved to the newly relaunched Vanity Fair and found herself once more the star photographer of the style Bible of the 80s. Many of her images, from John Lennon curled fetus-like with Yoko to a pregnant and naked Demi Moore, have been called, perhaps a little overexcitedly, icons of our time. But when the International Center of Photography in New York offered her a retrospective exhibition in 1991, she became the only living photographer, with the exception of Irving Penn, to have been given such an honor. Her exhibition is currently touring Europe and arrives in Britain in 1994.
16. It's a 16. 16 as in, that's like a fish eye almost or something, no?
No.
Yes, it is.
No, no. It's
Yes, it is.
head and shoulders.
Let's see. Give it to me. No, it isn't. Yeah, what are you doing? Work is really like a baby, you know, that needs to be fed all the time. You know, it's something you have to take care of. It doesn't take care of itself. You know, it doesn't happen, you know, by magic. And this year with the book and the show, it's sort of like the baby graduated.
At the International Center of Photography, it was the most popular exhibition that we've ever had in our history, which means it was more popular than Cartier-Bresson. It was more popular than a Man Ray fashion show we'd had a couple of years ago.
Thanks. Roxanne, you're like this.
I think there are two kinds of celebrity that are involved in Annie Leibovitz's work. One is the celebrities that she photographs, and the other is her own celebrity. And I think it really plays into the way that Annie works, and it also plays into the way that the sitter responds to the pictures, and also the way that the viewer responds to the photographs.
Where's my camera when I need it? I don't know. Sure I can do it? Hey, come on. Pass it up. Hey, you want... Okay, what can you do here? Okay. Gettysburg. No?
No.
Fort Augustine.
No. Guess again. Northern Virginia. Manassas.
My father was in the Air Force, and he traveled throughout the United States, and he basically took us all with him, and we basically just traveled the country. And we couldn't afford to stay in hotels when we moved, and we basically were all thrown in the backseat of the car and began to expect that as a way of life, you know, to move every 2 or 3 years. We were our own best friends because we traveled so much, and we had to, you know.
You had to befriend each other, or else, although in the car at times it was a hellion on wheels. And you know what? What did you say when it got too heated? Remember, what did you say, Sam?
I said, shut up.
No. He said, I'm going to stop this car. I'm going to pull this car over to the side. Oh, gosh, no. Some more movies.
I mean, there's a lot of excitement in sort of picking yourself up and moving. You know, you can change yourself. You got to see how a lot of people lived in so many different ways, and I got to see the country, and I fell in love with the idea of looking out the window. And, you know, I look back at it now and I realize what I'm doing. I basically had framed my life, you know, a lot of it through the windows of cars. family basically is as close as one can get to another person, and have nothing to hide from each other. And when I first started doing portrait work and posing people, it was what I wanted from other people. It was what I thought would be the ultimate situation, is to have someone relaxed enough to just be themselves. There was one photograph in my grandmother's house of my mother's family, arranged from youngest to the oldest, and they're on the Atlantic City boardwalk, looking straight out at the camera. And it's taken by an anonymous photographer. The simplicity of it and the beauty of it, and the composition. I can see that photograph repeated, in a lot of my work. The work has always been art to me, and very early on, I used to, when I was younger and more arrogant, I used to think that the people were very lucky to be in my photographs. I mean, that the photograph was always the most important thing that I was doing.
In 1968, she went to study painting at the San Francisco Art Institute.
It really wasn't until I took a night class in photography and started to use the darkroom there and start to print that I was totally, seduced by the darkroom, by watching the magic of the work sort of come up in this kind of immediate way, It was much faster than painting. I do enjoy the idea that the work goes over a period of time. It does reflect the times, for good or for bad. And it's done through these people that I, met along the way.
I think the thing that's unique about the work is that it traces an aspect of American popular culture for the last 20 years. It deals with politics, but in the very beginning parts of the work in the 70s, it's really based on the youth culture strongly.
In 1970, while still at art school, she took a portfolio of her work along to Rolling Stone magazine. Rolling Stone was then only 3 years old and rapidly gaining ground as the voice of the new youth culture, documenting everything from the contemporary music scene to drugs and politics. Her work was immediately accepted, and by 1973 she'd officially become Rolling Stone's chief photographer.
Well, Annie was, one of the closest editorial collaborations I've ever had with anybody, and she defined the look, helped define the look and the style of Rolling Stone. And, even though she hasn't worked steadily for us for 10 years now, somehow her spirit is still in it in a very serious way. I mean, I suppose half the public currently thinks that she still works for us. But that collaboration was really intense and very, very productive.
I was looking to be adopted and and found Jan and Jane. It turned into family for me. It was more than a magazine. It was a way of life. The first cover was actually one of the photographs from the peace rally, and it was a crowd shot, and they used it as an illustration for revolution in the country, at that time.
It started as photojournalism. She'd go down the road with rock and roll groups, or go to places. We'd be covering a lot of cultural stuff at those times, of say, religious, Maharishi type, extravaganza, and she'd do that. Or Tom Wolfe went to cover the astronauts and the launch of the Apollo, and she'd go along with Tom. The campaign trail, the 1972 campaign, whatever we were doing, she was in the thick of it. I mean, she was working every day of the year.
Those early years were really golden in the sense that there was a lot of strength in being able to photograph without people thinking that you were doing anything. It was sort of like being invisible. I'm thinking back on Lennon, and Lennon was always like trying to put me at ease and trying to, let me relax. I think I always looked so worried. There was a certain kind of, let's help her out. let's just help her get through this or something like that.
By the mid-70s, Rolling Stone embodied the spirit of a generation and provided a forum for writers as diverse as Tom Wolfe and Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter Thompson was a political journalist who had acquired cult status among the magazine's readers. Thompson and Leibovitz had a close and somewhat stormy relationship for many years. He now lived in seclusion in Woody Creek, Colorado.
Something? 1970s?
Yeah.
Barely, man. I have so much brain damage I can just barely remember the 80s. Or yesterday, for that matter.
Hunter is, like Annie, is like one of these raw talents, just full of energy. It's just almost explosive.
That's horrible. That must be Annie Leibovitz.
And working with Hunter has been at times a little bit like working with Annie, So long hours, altered states of mind, intense concentration, and just, the enormous amount of fun.
Happens every night. That's the neighbor's pig. Comes over and tries to get into the peacock cage. He gets caught in the mechanical, what do you call it, nutcracker.
He would get pissed as hell anytime, he saw me. It was like I would blow his cover. I mean, he just felt he would come out at night and sort of lurk in the bars, and that's where he got his stories. He really was a lone wolf and liked to prowl on his own.
She was a photographer 25 hours a day. That's intolerable. I once burned all of her film in the fireplace there. And then she threw her Hasselblad into the fireplace.
He had this habit of turning the lights off in the car so he could see the stars and the moon. And we were driving up the highway, and he was driving what the police would call erratically. He was changing lanes. So he got pulled over. And I remember Hunter yanking me out of the back saying, "Annie, you have to take pictures."
I realized I was in trouble. So I began yelling over the car. Annie, you bitch, get over here, bring that camera. And she responded. One of the great heroic acts of all time. She pulled herself together in this horrible mescaline frenzy, brought the Nikon out, and took pictures.
I did start to take pictures, and I was really surprised the policeman suddenly completely cooled off and got very nervous and did leave him alone. I felt as if I was in a very special place because, I wasn't being told what to go out and see. I basically had to go out and see what I saw, and it was really impressionistic, whatever I came back with, usually ran. And there were a lot of times that the pictures were the crutch for the magazine. They didn't have a story and they just ran the pictures. That was, of course, true with Hunter filing for Nixon leaving the White House.
Mistakes, yes, but for personal gain, never.
Gone, but not forgotten. Missed, but not mourned. We will not see another like him for quite a while. He was dishonest to a fault. The truth was not in him. And if it can be said that he resembles any other living animal in this world, it could only have been the hyena.
I couldn't compete with the White House press corps. I couldn't compete with the big photographers because they were in the place they had to be to get the picture at the moment. I had to wait till the crowd had left, and then I took my picture of some sort of detail. And to see those details sort of blown up, large in the magazine, they were very powerful. In 1975, when Mick Jagger asked me to be the tour photographer, I jumped at it. You know, I remember Jan Winter said to me that he couldn't guarantee that I would have a job when I came back to Rolling Stone if I did this, and he was not very happy about me going off to do it.
She actually came on the whole tour, which is like a very long time to want to photograph